Dr. Lyons-Weiler has been publishing biomedical research for over 25 years, leading a movement to restore science as a tool for truth and public accountability. He founded and is editor-in-chief of the journal Science, Public Health Policy, and the Law, a journal that had massive impact during the COVID-19 disinformation period, and then again during Secretary Kennedy's confirmation hearings. Dr. Lyons-Weiler is the president of the Institute for Pure and Applied Knowledge, IPAC, and creator of IPAC EDU, an innovative educational platform that helps thousands of students, from teens to retirees, develop the skills and confidence to engage with science, medicine, and public policy. With over 60 peer-reviewed publications, Dr. Lyons-Weiler has contributed to mission-first research in cancer biology, genomics, vaccine safety, neurodevelopment, autoimmunity, and environmental toxicology. He's best known for originating the concept of pathogenic priming, identifying systematic flaws in vaccine trial designs, and helping build the foundation for independent community-rooted research networks across the U.S. He's the author of The Environmental and Genetic Causes of Autism, Cures versus Profits, and Ebola, An Evolving Story, and is widely respected for his fearless, objective analysis and scientific integrity. His Substack, Popular Rationalism, reaches over 60,000 readers each week with clear-eyed, data-driven commentary. Grounded in philosophical empiricism and a fierce commitment to scientific integrity, Dr. Lyons-Weiler is known for his courage in the face of consensus pressure and his refusal to let politics or funding bias dictate what science is allowed to find. Please join me in welcoming James Lyons-Weiler.
Wow, thank you, Justin. That was an amazing, nice introduction I wrote for myself. Thank you. Amazing, thank you. Hey, can everybody just stand up for a minute and shake your glymphatics out a little bit? It's been a long morning, and I'm going to go on and on and on. You're going to really want to... Okay, sorry for the ladies that have to go to the restroom now. I want to ask you guys a question. Why are we here today? We're here today because the people that have had control of these institutions that you've heard about from our past speakers, the NIH, the HHS, and so on, they've lost their way. They've lost track of the fact that we have a sacred intergenerational contract of responsibility to our children, our grandchildren, and to future generations. What kind of world are we going to hand the next generation and 7 generations on? Mark Skidmore, good friend of mine, colleague, I have to issue a small citation, a correction. There are not 2 kinds of reality, right? There's one kind of reality, and the battle is not just regulatory capture, it's epistemic capture. Empirical research only works if we all agree that we do not know something. If you start making a knowledge claim that's not based on empirical research, and then you go along and find all the positive confirming instances that you can find, you're actually doing the kind of science that the Austrian school decided was the way that you should do science, which Nazi Germany just loved, literally. And Karl Popper, the philosopher of science, worked overtime writing book after book after book. You want to fix science in the United States of America? Every single science degree in every major institution should require readings from Karl Popper. Every last one of them. And if we do that, then we will have done a good thing to the future generations and the kind of world we're building. If you think that there's a monolith of corruption, there's not. Corruption has this way of popping up here and there. In corporations, the science that has to be done is the one that makes the product look safe and effective. It's not just vaccines. That's the science that has to be done. We have to rewrite the rules of ethical capitalism in the United States so that they don't answer to the investors only on what data they're allowed to bring forward. You can't publish that. That's going to hurt our investors. It's actually considered unethical for them to be charitable to humanity. This is confusing to me, right? I want to say that I'm going to use broad brushstrokes because there's a timer somewhere, and I don't want to go over time. I don't want to say that I'm against all corporations. I'm not. And I know many, many ethical corporations. But in universities, corruption pops up in the form of putting forward the best results that you have because you're most likely to get funding. It's the most natural thing you're going to do. But they have this problem called the circular file problem where the negative results are never published, so we really don't know what's not known. I used to run a podcast, What We Do Not Know Yet, WWNYK. It sounds like a television station or a radio station, right? I mean, it's so important that we win this war over what we know and what we don't know and how we go about knowing things. I've dedicated the rest of my life to this, no matter what it costs me. So if you're at a university and you're attracting, if you're a senior faculty member or administration and you're attracting young people because they happen to know the newest tech, they've just come out of the graduate school training, they've got the latest and the greatest ideas. And you pull them under your umbrella and then you steal their ideas and steal credit for it, and then you go off and you get yourself tenure, you're part of the problem and you know who you are. I've seen those guys in action. Those guys are the kinds of people that these complex systems actually select for. I call them creatures with too many elbows, if you know what I mean. If anybody know what elbows up means in Canada? These guys have elbows everywhere. And we know them by the names of like Anthony Fauci, right? On my tombstone, he was the anti-Fauci. I really do, I want that. Make a record of that, okay? It's not hard to do what's right, just follow that guy and then do the opposite. Seinfeld, okay? Just do the opposite. They had an ethical duty to protect the nation's investment in molecular biology, of course, because hundreds of millions of dollars went into that. And then they said, let's call it translational research, time to get that investment back in the form of medicines that are actually going to help people feel better and be healthier. But somewhere along the way, the life-savingness, and somewhere along the way, the fact that medicines that make people sick tend to lead to more medicines in market that make people sick that tend to make more medicines that lead to market that make people sick kind of took hold of us. That's what's happening. In medicine itself, you've got these conflicts of interest of for-profit, not-for-profit. We just heard about those complex entanglements. This trip to Washington, I've been back and forth quite a few times now. I've had no fewer than, and no insult to anybody here who made these approaches, but no fewer than 4 approaches for funding to me from a corporation to help them because they know how close I am to Secretary Kennedy. And each time I decline, and I say because I can't pick the winners, I have to have a clear head. Most likely one day I'll have my hand on a Bible swearing that I didn't take any money for the way that I'm working with the Secretary and his team. And that I don't have a conflict of interest. I do have a conflict of interest to report today, and I didn't hear any of you guys say whether you did or not, so I'm going to call you out on that. But I run the journal Science Public Health Policy in the law, which was cited twice during Mr. Kennedy's confirmation hearings. And there's a little bit of revenue that comes into my life that way, and I'm not sure exactly what percentage goes to what. I tend to reinvest in my little company, but I don't think anybody can disagree with most of what I just said, right? We've seen tobacco science. Remember tobacco science. It's how you fake the data, make the product look safe, and deny, deny, deny. What about fen-phen? We've heard Vioxx twice. But it's not just medicines and those kinds of consumer products. It's also big chem, which we're really not supposed to talk about today. We're not supposed to talk about ExxonMobil and the MTBE leaks or the unlined oil pits in Ecuador and the unfettered sale of friable plastics. These are that are making people sick that don't deserve to be sick so that a corporation can make some easier money. But none of these problems, including vaccines, by the way, are solved by science just being a self-correcting process. That's a myth. If you think about the big controversies that Paul talked about and others, they were solved in court. They were solved with millions of dollars and both sides producing evidence and some judge somewhere saying, or jury saying, okay, we're going to award you. That's not science. Do we want litigation? Do we want to litigate science? And we're going to hear about retraction, but I'm going to tell you, retraction puts a scientist in a very bad situation because it comes with stigma. Retraction of your study means that you did something wrong. So what the journals have decided to do is we're not going to tell you what you did wrong. We're simply going to retract it and say there's some methodological thing and, you know, somebody disagreed with your results. The stigma is still there because nobody knows the story. Oh, you got a paper retracted. Well, what does that really mean? We can't then, as scientists, sue the journal and then hold up that paper and say, right, Jason, look at this paper that I had to, it's so bad, I had to sue the journal to keep it in the pages. It's unimaginably bad, the stigma that would happen to the scientists that way. So with hundreds of millions of dollars in legal fees and so on, great. That's not science. What are we allowed to question and who controls it? To me, science is for knowing things. It's a way of knowing. I think we should be allowed to question everything. If there's social stigma, well, isn't that what science always did, was resolve social differences? Isn't science one of the gatekeepers on tyranny? So that if there's something that's changing the hormonal development of our children, we should be allowed to talk about it and still embrace them as our children without castigation and without all this stigma that comes along with controversy. And I want to know who in medical research decided that controversy in science was a bad thing, right? I mean, my gosh, if you wrote a paper and it was controversial in biology, you just hit it. You're going to be in Science News. It's a controversial thing. They debate, But in medicine, now all of a sudden it's, oh, that's a problem. You question carcinogens in food, go for it. If you reduce emissions from diesel near schools, go for it. These are heroes, right? But if you're going to question mercury, aluminum, and unsafe proteins in vaccines, all of a sudden, after a long career of fighting environmental toxins or doing chemical research or environmental biology and ecology and evolution, all of a sudden you're a crazy person? How does that work? I mean, that's just propaganda-based messaging that's very effective, and we learned it from the CIA about how to shut down social movements. They failed. They have failed. Not only have we won, but they have failed. So I'm not offering problem after problem, but I do have to point to de-weaponization of science as the priority. We can understand it. We've got all the catalogs. We've got the books written. We've got the editorials. We've got the blogs. We've got the podcasts. We've got the stories. We need to shift towards de-weaponization of science, and we know how to do that. We know that we have attorney generals that are looking at 28 journals. Attorney generals in the United States have been handed a list of 28 papers that were wrongfully retracted by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., our secretary. The former Attorney General told the American Academy of Physicians and Surgeons last month that all of those journals have now been put on notice. All of them. But there's someone I want to call out. If you're from the press, I want you to look at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, their website, and tell me that they are not committing fraud by telling every patient's parent that aluminum in vaccines is safe. That's just outright fraud. It's fraud in advertising. It's willful deception, all of it. You know, he doesn't tell, Paul Offit does not tell the public that 0.03% of the aluminum that you ingest goes all the way through your body without ever causing a problem. You don't even make it to the bloodstream. But he says you're going to get more aluminum from food and water and anything made of water than you'd ever get from vaccines. It took IPAC, which has this tiny, tiny little budget, to publish the fact that babies on the first day of life get between 14 and 20 times the amount of aluminum injected into their body that any adult would ever get from any other vaccine. 20 times? What are we doing to our children? Hepatitis B. We also educated the world in a series of publications that aluminum from food is not absorbed nearly as much as that, so we don't have to look at that as a model. It's a wrong model. They had control of all of these agencies, and they have lost control. While they had control, they could have fixed it. They can never be allowed back again, ever. Because it wasn't enough for them to have 95% vaccine coverage and cash their checks, or 97 or 98%. They had to go for the lie of 100% vaccine coverage was necessary. And it wasn't enough for them to make those profits. They actually had to castigate and harm people that were speaking out against vaccine injury and alerting people to the possibility, doing the job of the federal government about informed consent, to the point where a bioethicist from New York University a few years ago, before COVID, actually made the announcement that they were at war with anti-vaxxers, so it was okay for them to do anything they wanted to do to us. They announced a civil war in the United States of America. I'm not going to mention his name because, please, I'm not going to mention his name because I'm sure he has family. And I'm sure he's kind to his family. Okay? But history tells us, story after story after story, that science is not going to fix itself. It takes someone like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's going to bang their heads together. And I want to close with the promise and the challenge that it is not up to the panelists here, or any of the speakers today, or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. alone. It is not up to us to make sure that when government funds science and it's published, it's actually science, not fraud. It is up to every human being in these great United States of America to watchdog science, to doubt science, to be skeptical of science, to double check things, and to write letters to editors of journals if you find a ridiculous study and say, how did you publish this? Don't ask for retraction, ask for discourse. Because through discourse, if the journal will publish discourse, then let society, let the scientific community decide. Thank you for your attention. Let's have a great day.